Welcome back to Benny's Custom Works, proudly supported by Haltech and Sparesbox. Don't forget Benny 5 on checkout this week. We are playing 2Js. We do have my ITBs, they've just arrived. We've also got some fuel injectors from Paulie, and I've managed to wrangle a e-throttle motor from Dartone Racing. Anthony was kind enough to lend me that one. Looking at how I may have to modify it, I may own it by the end of the day, but we're all going to find out together. So first things first, we're going to actually mount the ITB unit to the engine. We are going to pull it apart, however, because full disclosure, it is a cheap kit and I've already had to buy some parts to modify it. I did buy some linkage bars from EFI Hardware so we can actually balance the throttles a bit later on. The kit comes with just locked shafts, so there's no way to actually independently balance the 3 throttles. So it's a 6 throttle unit, but it's very similar to an R32 GTR where each throttle unit actually has 2 throttle blades, much like a dual throat carburetor or anything like that. So yeah, it's an entry level unit, but I think for what we're going to do with it, it's going to work really well. It actually does come with trumpets as well, which I've already removed because I have been playing around with it. But the goal for today is to get on the engine and also get our throttle motor mounted and work out our linkage length. We do need to also modify the linkage bracket on the throttle motor as well, because we want our motion ratio to be 1:1. So the throttle linkages that's on the throttle body are 38 millimeters for the pivot point length. The throttle motor, or the driver motor, I think is only about 30 at the moment, but there is enough material on the bracket to actually be able to modify that and drill it to 38 mil. But that means I own it, so I want to make sure that we are going to actually do it that way before modifying that one, because if I modify it, I own it, and we want to make sure that it's all spot on. So we'll rip it apart. Well, we'll get the throttles on, we'll rip some other bits and pieces apart, we'll balance the throttles, and start looking at mounting the motor. I'm actually thinking of mounting the motor to the passenger side engine mount that's on the block, the steel part that stays with the block, so nothing can move independently. You have to mount it to the same thing the throttles are mounted on. I'm sure that goes without saying. But I did recently see a car that they'd actually use intercooler pipe to mount the throttle cable. I know that's not directly relevant, but it is something you need to keep in mind, that anything you're doing with a throttle linkage or a throttle cable or an e-throttle motor, no matter how you do it, all of the things need to be mounted together, not independently, because you'll get variations in throttle application. And in a really good example of this one, if you were to blow an intercooler pipe off, the throttle's gonna be jammed wide open. So keep that in mind. Lots of chats, but we're gonna play with some stuff. And we do need to modify some things on the engine, because the coolant hard lines are gonna need to be changed because they're gonna get in the way. But after a bit more research, the lines I was gonna make don't actually need to be there anyway, because they're water lines to supply the throttle body and also to supply the engine oil cooler. Neither of those things are there anymore, so we can actually just block them off, and it's not going to impede coolant flow because we still have our heater circuit. So if the thermostat's closed, the heater circuit is a the thermostat bypass, so we don't have to worry about these other lines being the thermostat bypass. Lots of words, throttles and thermostats. Let's get into it. Well, I'm just thinking, do I block that off first? Let's just get the throttle sorted first, and we can pull stuff off here and there. I'm just gonna chuck 3 knots on it.
Oh yeah, Isaac's not part of this episode, just
no, he's full driving. Not. So I'm gonna back all of these off. So they link the throttles, so as soon as I back this one off, see these no longer locked together. While it's not ideal, the placement of where I wanna put the motor means we've gotta actually run the front throttle as the master throttle, and then the other 2 are linked off. I was actually hoping to have the middle one as the master, and then it drive one each way. But yeah, unfortunately, due to the spacing and the way they've made these throttle shafts, I've got to link it to this front one, which it's not the end of the world, but it's just something we've got to keep in mind. I do want to get all of these shut, but the other thing I also want to do is actually put a little bit of preload on the balance linkages, so that I can actually shut them more if I want to, so that it's not just opening them. Because what actually happens, if you have a look here closely, this adjustment here moves the shafts independently. So if you look here, you're getting some adjustment. I know it's very hard to see, but all I want to do is have maybe a couple of millimeters of adjustment there, just so that we've got the potential to shut the throttle as well as open it, if one throttle's open more. I do have some return springs still coming as well, which I was hoping we would get this morning, but Shout out to Australia Post. If you want to see the latest bloopers from our channel, make sure you jump on our YouTube memberships. If you do want to see the episodes early and ad-free, jump onto our Patreon. The links are below. So I've only got one return spring on this throttle at the moment, but I'm actually going to put one here in this space. Yeah. And then the other ones are going to go on this end here.
Benny, for us that have no idea
yes, mate.
What ITBs are.
Individual throttle bodies.
Individual throttle bodies, okay. Instead of?
One throttle body. So each cylinder now effectively has its own throttle body.
And that's advantageous because?
More airflow. It's just more surface area really, like it just allows you to get more airflow. Also the throttles are much closer to the inlet port, so you don't have all this tubing, which it really depends on the application if that's a good or a bad thing. In NA motors, obviously you want to get the air in as quick as possible with the shortest runner as possible. You can actually tune the torque band with different length trumpets. So these are, I would say, a mid-length trumpet. They are going to be fine for this. It's also not, the actual honest truth is this isn't really like a max effort setup either. This is still a street car, so we don't need to be super sciencey with it, but it's also worth trying to get the most we can out of the setup. There's no point sort of doing half of it, so we've bumped the compression up a bit and got some nice cams from Kelford in it as well, so want to make sure that we obviously make the most of the setup we've got.
Do you have an estimation of how much power gain there'd be from, say, a stock intake setup or single throttle body to this individual
throttle body alone? It's really got to work together. Like if you just put ITBs on a stock engine, it's probably actually going to make the same power or maybe even less.
That sounds wicked, right?
Well, it will sound better, but because we've upped the compression ratio and added cams and valve springs, those things combined should make the most of the whole combination. So kind of similar to what we did with the Sigma when we went from a small carby to two carbies, which is effectively still individual throttles. Yeah, it's allowed basically the same kind of thing.
What goes here?
Injectors.
Oh, of course.
Yes,
that's where they normally go.
Yeah, so if this was like a, say for instance, a hypertune plenum, very similar. I've got a SR hypertune flange, which is all but the same. That's very common because you want the injector to be close to the runner, unless you've got gnarly. The reason you put the injector in the runner rather than above the trumpet is really a fire thing. Like on full max effort ITB setups, you can see where they'll actually have the injector proud of the runner and it'll spray, or proud of the trumpet and it'll actually spray into the airflow that way. But obviously you can get some fuel misting that'll go outside before it sucks in, so there is potential for engine bay fires and all that sort of fun stuff. So don't really want that. And there's absolutely no way to engineer a setup like that in a road car. So that's sharp and they're sharp. I now have the throttle linkages all hooked together and just eyeballed on having the blades all in the same position. Please ignore this. This is the original cable actuator, I guess you'd call it, that was positioned here. I have moved it here purely for the interim just to actually run the return spring. I do have 3 return springs coming from EFI hardware, and they're actually going to fit in this position, in this position, and in this position. We're also not going to be putting a TPS directly on the shaft of the throttle bodies. I'm actually going to be using a very own dual position or dual sensor TPS directly on the back of this actuator for 2 reasons. Sometimes if it is on the rail, it can actually give you a bit of a false signal. If there's any play at all in the throttle linkage, it can result in noise in the TPS. So this being on here is literally the back of the driver shaft, so it cannot give us a false signal. And being e-throttle, it's got to be spot on, because any vibration or any weird signal is going to result in a fault, which basically means we've got no throttle, and it will default to the shut position. So the reason I've gone for e-throttle in this setup is because we've got all the functions we can ever want, like idle control, cruise control, and obviously throttle. So we will be adding a keypad in the car when we're running the Haltech R3. so that we do have functions like cruise control. We're also going to add things like fan override, fuel pump override. So if we're doing something funky, like putting E85 in it, we can just operate the factory fuel pump, pump the tank out, and then we can have all of our fuel flush back in, and we can put E85 in the car. So should be pretty cool. Yeah, and I do love a good bit of a keypad function. Being in the Crest, having the Cresta, just everything on a keypad, it just makes it so much easier. And because we are using the R3, which is an ECU with a built-in PDM, it gives us functions like fan control, fuel pump control directly from the ECU. So it makes it much easier to integrate things like a keypad, as opposed to going, say, like a Haltech S3, which is a standalone ECU only. It's a cost-effective solution than going at an S3 and a PD16. So while the R3 doesn't have as many inputs and outputs as a PD16, for this particular car, it's going to work fantastically well. And in the case of the Cresta, we're going an R5, which has much more inputs and outputs. So yeah, there's an ECU out there for everyone. We are going to get back into this and start looking at our throttle motor position, because there is going to be a little bit of work in that. And I think I'm actually going to need to modify this throttle motor by removing this connector and actually making it, or converting it into a flying lead, because that, from my initial eyeballing, is where the oil filter lives. So we're going to take the oil filter off and position it, and then potentially modify that. While this is a BMW throttle motor, this is a very early iteration of Anthony's e-throttle kit, and they modified this to have that connector on it. Whereas if I'd got the standard throttle motor, it probably wouldn't have been in the way. But because I've got this one, I'm just going to work with this, and Anthony's a legend. He's hooked me up with this one for cheap, so going to use it and keep plugging away, because I think this is the best option for me at the moment. I do have another BMW one, but it's actually larger, and it doesn't have provision for the TPS because the BMW setup actually mounts it on the throttle rail. So I think I really think I want to stick with this, because I can put the Variome directly on the back of it. And it's even got the correct bolt spacing for a Variome, so direct fit up, and the D shaft's the right size, so lots of winning there. And then it means also that I can obviously put the third return spring on that throttle rather than having the TPS on the front or the TPS on the back. So yeah, it gives us lots of options. And I do like having a return spring on each one, because if for whatever reason these linkages were to fail or vibrate loose, it means that each one of the throttles will return closed rather than hang open and do all sorts of weird stuff. So yeah, it's easy enough to rectify on the side of the road if that were to happen. But I do want to make sure that there's a fail-safe in there, because having these linked by linkages, obviously, if something comes loose, these throttles are going to no longer work together. They would be independent again, so bad times. But we're going to suss this out now.
Do the springs have anything to do with performance in when you let off a throttle, they close quicker, so your throttle would be more sensitive?
Well, I mean, you need throttle return springs anyway.
Okay.
It is worth mentioning that this motor will actually close the throttle as well as open it. But most throttle bodies actually have a return spring in them as well, whereas this doesn't. This is a Falcon FGE throttle body, and as you can see, this one does have a return spring in it. This actually made it to the bench because I was going to cut it up and try and make one of those out of this, but being that I've got that BMW one now, I think we're going to stick with that. This also has a weird shaft size, but in saying that, if we were to use this has twin TPSs already in it, so this is an outside option, but I still quite like that. I think we're going to stick with that.
Man, I really hope the majority of people are not as confused as I am about anything you're saying.
Once it starts to go together, you'll get it.
Yeah, sweet.
So I'm going to rip the oil filter off, which will conveniently put a ding in. Doesn't matter too much, that oil filter's only going to last. Hey!
B.
Talk shit about Australia Post, and then now they're bringing it.
Today?
Yeah. We get throttle. Now we're going to get throttle springs today. Sorry, Australia Post. This is obviously the throttle actuator, which when you supply power, this motor moves. So it's like a stepper motor inside, and it uses what they call a H bridge in the ECU, which reverses the polarity. So you wire both of those pins directly to the Haltech, and depending on what the signal outputs, it'll either want to open the throttle or close it, and use it in conjunction with a pedal like this. So you can buy a Lexus SC430 throttle pedal, I believe, is the direct bolt-in for one of these. They're $500. This is from a Nissan X-Trail. Yeah, chat's lit. This is from a Nissan X-Trail, and it was $75 delivered from eBay. So, interestingly, the position sensor on this is the same as the Lexus one. All it is the bracketry is a little bit different. Conveniently, it still has a 2-bolt pattern, which is very similar to Toyota. All you need to do is open up those holes a little bit and potentially bend the pedal. If you are going to do an e-throttle conversion, my recommendation is to get a steel pedal, because you can weld to it and cut it up and modify it and even bend this shaft. I know the Commodore or the GM pedal is very common, but it's all plastic, so it's very hard to modify and adapt. So yeah, most Japanese e-throttle pedals actually are steel, so worth keeping in mind if you're going to do an e-throttle conversion, because as long as you use a non-OEM ECU, you can basically use any pedal in combination with any throttle motor or any e-throttle throttle body, because the ECU calibrates both ends. I am speaking in Haltech terms. I don't know what other ECUs actually do, so probably a bit of a caveat to that. But Haltech are very open to using any pedal in combination with any throttle body or any throttle drive and motor. So keep that in mind. You do need 2 TPSs though, so yeah, depends on your exact hardware, but do some research, I guess. This is just a mock-up oil filter now too. It's got a ding in it, but you'll work it out. So that's the issue we've got at the moment, is that
I see.
That's hitting there. So with that off, happy days. So I really want to position it about there, because we've got to look at our linkage line and knowing too that the linkage is going to bolt to the left side of this and the right side of this linkage arm. So we've got to take into account the thickness of the linkage in the bracket. And the other thing I need to do as well is look at where 38 millimeters is from the center of that shaft to this plate, because we need to make sure that our lever length is the same for both ends, because otherwise we'll get more movement out of this compared to this, and we may end up at full throttle here. These throttle butterflies actually don't open all the way, so I've got to keep that in mind.
Just quickly, you could actually mount that at this point or this point or this point?
I mean, you really want to have it in the middle, yeah. But unfortunately we have put it on the front. This arm acts directly on the front throttle body shaft. Yeah. It would have been nicer to have it on this side of the middle throttle body shaft, but because of the way the linkages have been stacked and the way this has been designed, this is not an e-throttle setup from factory, so we're converting it to work in a different manner to how it was originally designed. So I need to put all these bolts in actually, because the other thing should mention is I had all these throttles out because when the original setup was in it, the shafts were all joined together. So you've got to make sure that the throttles are actually dead in line with each other. Otherwise you get shaft binding really bad, which this actually did have. But now we've got these floating linkages from EFI hardware. It actually takes that issue away, because the tang is actually what it's driving on, rather than the throttle shafts being locked directly together. So it makes it a much better setup. I would assume that this type of linkage was adapted from like Weber IDAs or DCOEs. So it's a more like an older style linkage that would allow for this type of thing, where if the throttle bodies or the carbies aren't directly in line with the throttle shaft, it allows a bit of adjustment or floating. Random fact, this pattern is exactly the same as the GTR throttles. So if I put a plenum on this, I can actually get a plenum designed for a GTR. Either the factory Nissan one I could modify, or something like the Hypertune plenum that still uses the factory GTR throttles may work as well. So a few different options.
That seems so crazy just because you're working on a 2J right now.
Yeah, I would assume whoever's designed this has just pulled it from, like they've obviously pulled inspiration from other throttle setups. I think before I go too far down the rabbit hole, I'm actually going to pull this apart, just take the driver arm off and this end plate and this connector, because I want to take this off with I want to actually position this motor with the oil filter in place to make sure that it is all correct. This hardline, as we've already mentioned, is going to get deleted as well, so there's going to be no issues with the very own TPS. So yeah, we want to make sure that all our spacing's correct before we go fabricating brackets and stuff.
A nice sculpture you got there.
You like that?
Yeah. You're going to enter that in Bondi? Sculptures by the sea?
Probably won't. Maybe next year.
Yeah, give everyone else a chance.
Yeah, I don't want to go too hard too early.
Do you need that?
Yep.
Far out. It seems like a very delicate piece of...
Nah, it's just the cheese. It's just the cheese, bro. Oh, that's convenient. There's speed terminals.
Is that convenient because it's universal to work with?
Yep.
Lovely.
So that means I can just pop them off. And we're sorted.
That's a cool little demo.
So I can now take that out. Because I don't need that there anymore.
Are you just going to leave the hole as
No,
is?
I'll fill it with sealer. We'll run the wires through, because the plan for me will be just to run a cable out and then have to seal the hole. Like, we'll reseal all this up.
Yeah, cool.
Once it's put back together. I'm just going to put this on just for the interim. See what I did there?
You marked something?
So I coloured it in, and then I've measured 34.5 on my vernier, and then because it's a cheap one, I'm just going to thrash it. And I've just picked the centre of that shaft and pivoted the jaw to give me a 34.5mm arc from the centre of that. So that arc matches the spacing on the EFI hardware linkage arm. So basically it means that we've got a 1-to-1 motion ratio, so that we don't have a variation of ratio, because we don't want, when this moves 90 degrees, we want that to move 90 degrees is the easiest way of explaining it. And by having a shorter ratio on one or the other, you may need to move this 130 degrees to get 90 degrees on the throttle, or the other way around. At 60 degrees, this may have the throttles way open, so it may try and actually turn it past its resting position or its open position.
Yeah, like mechanically force it.
It'll try to, yeah. It does have, the throttles actually have a mechanical stop, which isn't actually set up correctly at the moment, but that's neither here nor there. But the good thing is now, if you have a look on this, you can actually see. So I'm just going to pick the thickest piece of material, which is probably going to be about here. If you go center line to there, we're probably going to be about there. So I'm just going to punch that and drill that to 4mm, because we're using an M5 bolt. We'll drill it to 4 and then tap it, so that we can actually use that 5mm bolt directly in this. Although I don't know if I'll actually tap it yet, because the EFI hardware arm comes with its own bolt, and there are 2 thread pitches in M5, so I want to make sure that I use the correct pitch. Actually, I think it tells you. I don't know. America drill bits.
So that's the closest to 4mm you got.
Well, I'll find out. I'll measure it. Although 5:30 seconds may be right on 4mm.
Sounds like a made-up number.
It is. 3.8. I think I'd rather go up because it's stainless. And the thing is too, it's actually not even a 4.3 will get me out of trouble, because the thread pitch is only like 0.7 of a mil. Oh, this is measuring at 4.1, so happy days. 4.1 to 4.2. Just tap that sucker.
To what?
5 by 0.8.
5 by 0.8. Yeah, cool.
Because the bolt I have is 5 by 0.8, so it should be fine. And I also ran this tap through the existing hole, and it went straight through, so let's hope. So we have our throttle motor that's now modified with the right linkage, positionage. So I'm thinking this is really about where I want it to live. And the good thing is I can actually weld plate directly off this
Oh yeah.
So I'm going to weld a plate to the engine mount, and then it'll come out, and then I'll brace it back to itself so it can't move. I'm going to use probably 6 mil, so it really shouldn't move anyway by rights, but just my luck it would.
Where are your mounting points on the actual?
There and there.
Yeah.
But the problem is that is above the height, the plane. So I need to basically make a bracket that's going to go around, because we're going to be pretty well in line with this brace here, so we'll potentially just go back down into here. I also don't want to impede on the bolts, so that I can take the motor off, then unbolt this separately. It's just so shit doesn't go in there anyway. Yeah, it's not going to work, so I'm going to have to make the bracket in 2 pieces, because that's going to go that way. So if I go here and then...
Where'd that little piece come from?
Hot piece.
How are you thinking that spacing's going to do?
I don't think it'll matter.
Now you're going to cut the excess of that bracket off?
Yeah, I'm going to cut the bits out that I don't need.
Which you just marked.
Yeah.
The reason for cutting that hole is so you can...
So when I cut it, I don't have to worry too much about that corner.
Yeah.
And I'm actually going to countersink it so that I can lineage it on an angle and just blend into that countersink.
How's that looking?
It's on there.
Hey, it looks neat.
The one annoying thing is I didn't have a piece of plate big enough to make it out of one piece.
Yeah.
You could just put the whole kit in one bag, guys. It's a lot of bags. It's good because it's left and right hand thread. Like you've only got to turn the turnbuckle one way and it'll lengthen or shorten it.
Oh.
I'll show you in a sec. So imagine that's sitting here.
Yep. Mint.
Kind of. This is definitely not the right way to do any of this, just saying. But the problem is this is my brain as we're going. It's like still checking and moving and changing, and well, I'm just kind of guessing with this stuff until we get it in the right position. That's really where it's got to go. Go?
Yep. All the way?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that is all the way.
I think we're at the point of tacking it.
So by changing those top 2 bolts to Allen keys, does that solve?
Well, the head's not as big and then it's not going to hit the bracket. An Allen key will be fine there because I'll be able to get an angled Allen key socket onto it. What I want to do is basically tack that enough that I can check the motion of the motor and feel if there's any binding or any funny stuff. Yeah, that's fine.
Sweet. I got it.
Thanks, man.
Wait, so, sorry, what did you mean? That you've got to put a socket on there? Why?
Because I want to spin, I want actually the motor to do the driving, not the throttle body to push the linkage backwards.
Okay.
Because technically what I'm doing is testing the linkage in reverse there.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, see it does. It's like it needs to go up a touch. Because it's going past.
The whole motor or just
the linkage.
Oh, okay.
Because it's going past center, which may mean I've got to trim this now. Because it's going to potentially touch the fuel rail.
Yeah.
Because yeah, when you drive it this way, it feels fine. But when you drive the motor this way,
yeah, okay,
you can feel it's got like a bind up. That's now much better.
Lovely. You got to be proud of that one.
Yeah, I don't mind it.
That's got to be record time too.
MIG welding, bro, it's quick. That's something coming out. I have to take that off. That's annoying. Oh well. May as well delete this while we're here. Now I should be able to just fusion weld those. That'll do.
So that's a fusion weld.
Yeah, so fusion basically means there's no filler. It has limited success and limited application. It's definitely not something, a technique you'd use structurally. But what we're actually doing is using the parent material and burning itself back into the weld.
That's nifty.
You like that, do you?
Yeah. Looks good. Feel alright?
It's not too bad. So I was really only going to use this part of the bracket for mock-up to get the motor correct, and I was going to build a bit more down here, but the whole thing's rock solid. There's actually no point making any more bracket. It's not going anywhere, so I think we just call that part done.
Cool. You did mention there's a slight concern,
No.
which is not a concern to you, but
We just need a flush mount BSP or NPT plug, whatever that hole is.
Can we just get a demo on that?
It's just quite snug on that. But we've actually got 10 mil, so all it's got to do is go down in that hole.
Yeah.
And then we're sweet.
Yeah. Cool.
So this is the return spring stop effectively.
That's what the straight part of the spring's resting on.
Yep.
Pretty much what you've done here.
Yeah, exactly that.
So there's 3 of them across in total, is there?
Yeah, there's a return spring on each throttle assembly, so
Yeah.
at the moment we've got one here,
Yep.
and then there's one on this too.
Cool.
This one's also the throttle stop.
Why do you have to shorten that?
I'm not shortening the whole thing, I'm sinking the spring into it. Jesus.
Too much Tabasco. Always
Too
happens.
much. The spring itself's actually going to sit in there, just to get a bit of height back really.
What's the issue with the height?
We run because we've got to put throttle shaft on there still.
Okay, gotcha. Once you put the trumpets on, is there a gasket, something that goes here?
Is it just O-rings? So the good thing now is because we've got return springs on every throttle, they should be absolute zero. So it means I can basically just set the linkages and call it done.
Yeah.
Until the cars run, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. So
Like
then,
they need to be dialed in properly with a
Yeah.
balance. I'm very, very happy with that. So we've now got return spring, return spring, return spring.
beautiful.
So if any of these linkages were to fail, come loose, whatever, we now have return springs.
Cool.
But I am going to Loctite these while I'm here because I did Loctite. Now that's fully final fit.
Yep.
I'm going to Loctite both of these.
Cool. So go take it apart, Loctite it.
Well, I'm going to just crack it. I'm going to be a little bit sneaky.
All right.
I'm going to spill it everywhere. But what I'm going to do is just put a tiny bit on the screw and actually wind the screw back inside that mount,
Yep.
then wind it back out. I'm not going to Loctite the balance screws again or as yet because we still need to set them probably with Isaac's. I think it's called a synchronometer.
Sounds like the name for it. If there were ever to be one.
Yeah. If that's not what it's called, it is now.
To ask the obvious question, why it's called a balance screw?
You use that screw to balance the 3 throttles, so vacuum balance. Also not going to Loctite the throttle body one yet either. I will do this tonight. I do not want these vibrating loose. That will be a bad time. Well, I think what I'm actually going to do is take the throttles off and put the O-rings in because they can actually go on for the last time. This is very exciting, John.
Yeah.
I'm very excited.
Yeah. It's a nice
Actually, you know what else we can do? We'll take the throttles off and we'll do the injectors.
I hope you don't need to modify them at all.
Nah, direct fit, bro.
Cool. Because this says do not modify. Oh shit, it doesn't actually specify what not to modify.
That means don't mill the guts out. Don't try and high flow them.
Oh, righto.
If I had to take
I thought it was just a general statement. Just
Nah. That's my vibe anyway. Some time has passed. Now we need to modify the throttle actuator again.
So you use the same wires.
No, I would love to have used the same wires, but they're just way too short.
You're just pulling the wires from the old R32 GTR you had wiring harness.
Sure,
and
bro.
Just what you got lying around.
It's actually an old Haltech REM loom that they discontinued years ago, but it's very handy for harvesting wires out of. Means you get proper automotive wiring that we can use. I'm going to work out what the polarity of this motor is because it's not marked.
How exactly are you going to work out the polarity of the jiggers. You're just going to send it power and see what it does?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. How much power do you know how to send it?
18 volts. So that is currently in the rest position, and that's negative.
So that's
and that's
good.
positive, no.
Oh, okay.
So I need to swap the wire colours around because I want red to be positive.
Ah, okay.
Because then now we've got, it's aggressive, it's got plenty of torque. So that means positive equals open.
Glad you're sure. Are you just sealing this for the reason of, I don't know, driving in the wet?
Yeah, well it had already been resealed.
Okay.
Because this has had that aftermarket cover already fitted to the top of it. Obviously this wire length's got to be shortened a ton, but I just didn't want to have not enough later.
How long does that sealer take to set?
Probably an hour or so.
Okay.
Won't really matter.
I wasn't sure by your quick walk.
Oh no, it doesn't set up quick. It's just how I walk.
You have a very quick walk.
Thank you. You have a slow run. Do I have a slow run? Was that me running? I'm going to fill the front side of this with grey sealer as well once it's in there.
Yep. This is the old plug that you just took
yeah,
some
so I
material
shortened it. And just run the wire directly through it, hopefully.
Clever.
Well, I just didn't want to have to fill that whole void with sealer.
Yeah, of course.
And then the problem is if that sets up and leaks onto like the gear set or something like that. So that's now in there. I'm just going to seal those that connector up.
So after you've sealed that, this will go on, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
And then you can determine the wire length needed.
Well, I'm not even going to touch it.
Ah, okay.
I'll just leave that for Dave.
Just what you want to see.
Right.
Perfect fit.
Fit man. All ready for this?
Sure am.
Copyright infringement. Oh, that's lovely.
Clonk.
Lovely, lovely.
Do you want to mention what this little majigger is, just for the people that...
The ratchet.
The ratchet thing?
It's a vessel.
It's a
Battery
vessel.
ratchet. That's the brand.
Oh, right.
You twist.
Okay, I thought you were going somewhere with that.
No, it's a
pun
vessel
intended.
battery ratchet. We have a throttle linkage.
Looks good. Does it seem good? Lovely.
Check it out.
Do-do-do. Trumpets.
Newt. Yeah, so the trumpets have actually got O-rings in them as well. For $2.5 grand, even with all the EFI hardware linkages and stuff, it's pretty good. And the thing is too, if you didn't want to do e-throttle, you could probably get away with using the stuff that comes with it. Maybe add the balance shafts.
So what's the alternative? Is that a cable throttle then?
Yeah. The biggest problem with cable throttle and ITBs is you've got no idle control unless you set up an external idle control motor. And
Okay.
whereas e-throttle, we've got idle control, cruise control, obviously the normal throttle, and e-throttle is not like it used to be. Like, it's as good a throttle response, if not better, because you're not actually waiting for the lag in the cable.
We probably shouldn't be posting any of these videos, I realised. Because then everyone's bank accounts are going to be sad after seeing this.
My bank account's sad. Everyone needs the Pingu Dorts.
Pingu, oh, that's right.
Interestingly, these throttle trumpets only go one way. They're asymmetrically machined. I can't tell if that's deliberate or not.
Green for go.
Should actually check the length before I go too nuts. I just looked at them and said, oh, I think they're Falcon injectors.
Oh my.
Close enough.
Is that a rubber grease just to...
Sure is rubber grease.
Just to help them slot in to where
Just
they gotta go?
Yeah, just lube the O-rings.
Cool.
So that we can get them in and they're not damaging the O-ring itself. Don't want to pinch it or cut it.
Sweet. Actually, normally you use Vaseline, don't you?
Much of a muchness, whatever I got lying around at the time.
Cool.
I found this jar of rubber grease when I was cleaning up the other day, so
cool.
It will now forever be used.
What's the flow rate of these, or what's
they're about 500 cc, I think, which means we can go E85 if we want.
I know it's chalk and cheese, but what's in the Cresta again?
2200s.
Yeah, wow. Big numbers. What's the technique here?
Yeah, kind of get them on one at a time.
Nice.
We're on.
Good finesse.
You kids love to say finesse.
What would you call it?
I don't know, technique.
Nice. Here's another word that I've heard one of my younger and much cooler cousins use.
Oh yeah?
Sigma. Did you know of this?
Yeah, my kids say it.
So what does it mean? It's used as a
cool, I
positive.
think.
Yeah, it's used as a positive.
I think it's like best.
Yeah, righto. For a real world example, this is not so Sigma.
What do you mean? It is the best.
No, as in this touching the fuel
It's
rail.
fixed though.
Oh, so now it's Sigma.
Sure.
Oh, cool. This is apparently Sigma. Even though we're working on a 2J that's going to go into the GX81.
Imagine if we put the Sigma 2J into a Sigma.
That would have been trendy if we did it now.
Sigmaception. Well, that pretty much wraps up another episode. We have our ITBs assembled. We do have our e-throttle motor on. However, I think we are going to have to revisit the bracket a little bit and put a brace on that front side because after just hot starting it off the battery, it did actually move it, and the bracket does flex a bit. Oh well, more welding next episode. But stoked to have this thing still progressing. Massive thank you to MTQ also for the fuel injectors they've supplied for this build in this episode. We've got plenty more stuff coming on the 2J and on the Mark II, so plenty of things to come. It's hot. I want to go home. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.